In the past 10 years of YouTube history, there have been plenty of people who have succeeded as well as some people who have failed. And you wouldn't be surprised, most likely, to hear that there have been many people to scrape their way to the top of the totem pole. One of the most successful people in recent memory has been Felix Shelberg, better known as Pewdiepie.
The Third Reich was a period of rule in Germany from 1933 to 1945, a time controlled entirely by the Nazi Party. The leader of said organization was a man named Adolf Hitler, who has grown extremely controversial since his reign and death due to his leadership and the stances that he advocated for. By the late 1930s, Hitler and his regime began increasingly aggressive territorial demands, and by 1940 Hitler had captured a large chunk of Europe, which of course threatened Great Britain quite a bit. Hitler had planned for a worldwide conquest, and he likely would have come somewhat close to this had the war not ended in the mid-1940s. Interestingly, one country that Nazi Germany did not attempt to invade was Sweden due to the lack of resources and a long list of alternative concerns. Little did those involved in World War II know that Sweden had a lot more value than they would likely foresee, as they would in due time be starting an invasion of their own. Felix Shelberg was born on the 24th of October 1989 to Lotta and Ulf Shelberg. Raised in the city of Gothenburg, the developing Pewdiepie had an interest in both art and video games. It was often noted that he found an amusement in creating illustrations of such iconic characters as Sonic the Hedgehog and Super Mario Bros. Sonic the Hedgehog and the Super Mario Bros. Were both video game franchises first created in the 1980s and 1990s by rival video game publishers Nintendo and Sega. Mario was technically originally featured in the 1981 game Donkey Kong. In this, his character was originally known as Jumpman, and he didn't exactly run with his iconic modern colors. Since further Donkey Kong games have gone on to suggest that the Donkey Kong we see in this adventure is the grandfather of the 3D modern counterpart, it's been widely speculated among Mario fans that within the canon, Mario and Jumpman aren't exactly the same characters at all. Some have even gone on to suggest that Jumpman is most likely the rarely seen figure of Mario's father, although that's never been confirmed and any mention of this in the future isn't very likely. Sonic was first featured in 1991 on the revolutionary Sega Genesis, not to be confused with Terminator Genesis. The Terminator franchise began in 1984 with The Terminator, a horror film about a killer robot from the future that seeks out the main character as she will one day give birth to the savior of the future, John Connor. Terminator Genesis attempts to reboot the first film by presenting the same events but within an alternate timeline. It was widely panned by critics, but was surprisingly second only to T2 in terms of profit. Both Mario and Sonic have had their fair share of classic games, but it's pretty universally believed that Sonic games have been much more likely to be underproduced and rushed out to meet deadlines. Because of this, Mario tends to leave people with a much more positive impression. The first major game that Pewdiepie became interested in during his youth was entitled Tibia 7.6, which was an RPG game not unlike World of Warcraft but much less well regulated. It was here that he first built up a love for breaking the rules and giving commentary on the actions of other people. Sweden had and has a relatively strong gaming culture, meaning that Felix never had to worry about developing his passions in secret. While in high school, Felix took part in a school activity of a marching band, where he served as an essential brass team member as a trumpet player. A trumpet is a musical instrument that reaches back in documentation as far as 1500 BC, BC of course being short for before Christ, although before Common Era, or BCE, has grown to be much more accepted in the historical community in recent years. Trumpets usually start off in the production line as a series of long tubes that vary in size. A thin piece of copper is then cut off into a circle by an overweight black man. The machine itself works very much like a can opener. The circle is then stretched into a bell using a hole-punching-like machine. A piece of tubing is then stretched out on one side, and that is attached to the bell that was made earlier in the process. The conjoined parts are then shaved down and bent to create the perfect shape. It's important that each and every trumpet have the same dimensions and shape for total sound accuracy. The piece is then bent after being frozen to fix in the exact shape that we expect to see in most trumpets. Carl here can be seen assembling the valves for the trumpet, which are used to create the different notes that any talented trumpet player will need to switch between. Finally, Kathy works to put all the pieces together. it's not hard to see how something like a trumpet would influence both who Felix is as a person and the kind of content that he would try to make on YouTube. On January 11, 2016, PewDiePie uploaded a video to his second channel entitled, "I've Discovered the Greatest Thing Online." The video featured him looking into services on Fiverr and giving terrible requests. Fiverr is a website where people can request tasks to users for small sums of money, usually boiling down obviously to $5. Since its foundation in 2009, however, it has expanded to include more vast examples of purchasing options. For one of the requests, PewDiePie asked a group to hold up a sign which read "Death to all Jews," an allusion to the extremist viewpoints of Nazi Germany. This led many websites, most notably the Wall Street Journal, to assert that the various recent cameos of Nazi imagery on his channel had come down not to a dark sense of humor, but to an actual subliminal agenda. This eventually led to Disney deciding to sever their ties with the YouTube icon. Disney is a multinational mass media and entertainment conglomerate. It's the world's second largest media organization in terms of revenue. Disney was founded on October 16, 1923, by brothers Walt Disney and Roy O. Disney. The Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio established itself as a leader in the American animation industry before diversifying into live-action film productions, television, and theme parks. On March 24, 2014, in part so they could get closer to YouTube's biggest star, Disney purchased Maker, the network that PewDiePie was involved in up to this point. Maker Studio is an American worldwide multi-channel network co-founded by Lisa Donovan, former Chief Executive Officer Danny Zappin, Scott Katz, K-Sim G, Shay Carl, Ben Donovan, and Philip Defranco. Philip Defranco is an American video blogger and YouTube personality. He is most notable for The Philip Defranco Show, a new show centered on current events, politics, pop culture, and celebrity gossip, in which he voices his opinion, often presented in a satirical manner and with frequent jump cuts to create a fast-paced feel. In April 2016, he began to add weekend content, including The Friday Show, Not Safe for Work Saturday, and Sunday Fun Day. The latter two have not been featured as of December 2016. Following his severed connection with both Maker and Disney, many began to fully question if Felix truly did have an ulterior motive in including so many references to the Nazi movement with his Following his severed connection to both Maker and Disney, many began to fully question if Felix truly did have an ulterior motive to including so many references to the Nazi movement within his videos. In response to this, YouTube began to distance themselves from Shelberg as well, going as far as to cancel his YouTube series, Scare PewDiePie. YouTube Red is a paid streaming service ran by YouTube which features exclusive shows featuring various YouTubers of the larger arena of shapes and sizes. While many in the world have been skeptical of Felix since the widespread coverage of his most controversial jokes, there have been many that have come out in support of his channel. This has included such figures as Sargon of Akkad, Chris Raygun, Ruben Reviews, and of course H3H3 himself. Of all the impressions that PewDiePie has made on older generations and mainstream audiences, this has surely been one of the most shocking. Despite the controversy, it's clear to most people within the YouTube community that PewDiePie is just about as innocent as he ever was. Despite the hatred, it's clear that he isn't prepared to quit quite yet, even with so many people calling for such an event.
But hey, that's the internet for you, and on the internet, memes are king. Thanks for watching.